is Joey Hill. Gail and I have, well, Gail has a little bit of a history with Joey, and so I'm going to have kind of Gail introduce her a little bit, and then we'll start the interview.
If we say history as knowing her 20 odd years ago and suddenly getting reconnected, then yeah, we got a long history. I mean, we've known each other forever. I believe I edited your first book, didn't I,
Yes,
Joey?
you did. You were my editor for my very first book.
So, and see, that's a very strong and powerful and spiritual relationship that you never get past. Mm-hmm. So it's wonderful to reconnect with you, and I can't wait to hear what you've been doing for the last years.
So yeah, maybe you could start off by just kind of telling us what you write, Joey, and kind of how you got started, or how you got started writing in the first place. I'll let you decide how far back you want to go.
Okay, and feel free to interrupt me if I get too rambly. I started writing when I was in 5th grade, and been writing, started writing for publication in my 20s, and was first published in 2000 with Guardian of the Continuum. That was the book that Gail edited for me. It was fantasy romance, which that's what we kind of called it at that time period. There was no paranormal romance, urban fantasy. Publishers generally didn't want fantasy romance. They said it was a cross genre and nobody wanted it. And so, of course, when I sent out and got all my little rejection letters at that point in time, this thing called ebooks was coming along. And I looked at it and I said, and mostly people's opinion of it, it was about the same as vanity publishing. You know, it was what someone who couldn't get published did. And I said, you know, though, if nobody else is wanting it, let's try that. And so that's when I kind of came in contact with the very first early infancy e-publishers. And then they accepted Guardian of the Continuum. And that's where my published career started. I write... those first books were fantasy romance. I was a big fantasy reader, always with strong romantic kind of side stories. And I wanted a story that was fantasy with romance as the central, but like Jennifer Roberson, Mercedes Lackey, Marion Zimmer Bradley, that kind of element, you know, but more romance centric. So I was doing more of that. And but then something weird happened. I wrote my first contemporary romance, and because I love writing a love story. It really doesn't matter the genre, except I don't really do Westerns. But when I started writing it, I always liked stronger sexual content in them. I was not a big I did not really support the idea at the time that if you put too much sex in your books, you were being a lazy writer. I thought, well, you can make the sexual part just as strong an element, an important plot point, integrated with the rest of the story, move the characters along. And I felt if I was a woman who wanted stronger erotic content, not porn, and that's not a judgment on porn, but women want more emotion in their sexual reading. And so I wanted more eroticism. So I would put more of that into this first contemporary romance. But what happened when I was writing it, it kind of took a strange left turn. And all of a sudden it was not just erotic, it was bondage. It was, you know, he was tying her up. He was spanking her. He was doing all sorts of power exchange dynamics with her. And when he did that, and it startled me because I just plunged right into it. It's like, wow, this works. And I just got all very excited about it. I discovered my own submissive orientation at that time personally. And so I write BDSM, paranormal, and contemporary romance. I have about 50 titles and 6 series in those genres. And my earliest books, those first few, were kind of a side-by-side personal exploration as well as the professional. So that's how I ended up writing BDSM romance. So now I have vampires and mermaids, and I have boardroom executives and cops and Navy SEALs, and that's where I am.
Yeah, Gail and I were part of a writers group that, there.
There you go.
You know, Gail and I were part of a writers group that we had a guy who wrote the same genre, and we had pretty much a huge cross section people writing all different genres, and that I thought was one of our better writers groups, because you just had that diversity of perspective that really kind of enriched what, you know, if you needed an opinion on something, you tended to get a lot of good viewpoints, as opposed to just kind of very limited perspective. And I don't know, it helped you, you know, improve your writing. I think, because I think sometimes if people only associate with people who write only a very narrow genre, you know, it I don't know, it kind of hurts their development and growth. So
in writing and reading, I think reading across a lot of genres also helps your writing.
Absolutely.
So as far as, let me ask you this then, because I know some readers, I mean, there's the very sort of cliched titles that one can throw out, like 50 Shades, but what would you recommend to a reader who's sort of curious about the genre, you know, maybe really is honestly looking for what's a good quality series to get started off in the genre, besides your books, of course, which I'm sure are top
In
notch.
addition to her books.
Yeah, like what's your gateway drug, I guess, is my question. For
well, I've had a lot of, through the years, a lot of formative ones. I'm trying to, that's like narrowing it down now. Well, because of what I write, what I read now is probably a little bit more in depth or specialized different areas, like you know, my latest book, I had fire play, so I had read a couple of books with fire play in them, and primal play is in the next one, so I've got a reading on that. But Charisse Sinclair has a Shadowlands series that readers adore. It is fabulous. It is a great way to look at the genre. Annabelle Joseph, she has beautiful work in this field. Timber Dalton, it just very good. Eden Bradley. These are good books that kind of introduce readers to the genre and have the romance elements, etc., that people would enjoy. If they are looking for more of the, to kind of compare to the romantic treatment of it to the reality. One of the first books, and it's still one of my Bibles for the foundation stones, is Screw the Roses, Send Me the Thorns by Philip Miller and Molly Devon. I think I have that name right, but anyway, it's Molly and Philip. The last names are my stumbling block. But
and we can put these in the comments, so that so don't feel like you have to remember every name. So in the description, yeah.
Perfect. Well, but it was an excellent introduction nonfiction to the whole spectrum of BDSM, and it has a great bibliography in it. So those were different.
I get that. Yes,
I love that title too. Screw the Roses, Send Me the Thorns. That's a great title.
Yes, love that. I love that.
Yeah, one that you know, that I've had a lot of people tell me they enjoyed was Cressley Cole. I don't know if you're familiar with her at all, but she wrote some different series, and I think there's one called the Game Maker series. It's contemporary. It's about like three Russian brothers, I think. You know, and I haven't read the whole series, but it did seem to me, you know, pretty well written.
Oh yeah, she's excellent. Another very good choice. Let's say my golden retriever is having a nightmare over here. Hold on.
Oh, that is adorable. Oh my goodness. Yes.
I said, I didn't know if y'all could hear the little whining. It was like, what is that noise?
I thought it was my dogs.
we're all dog owners here, Joey. So yeah, don't feel bad at all. In fact, if you hear barking in the background, it might be my dog.
It might be.
How about, okay, so now that we kind of delved into kind of the gateway, how to get people into this genre a bit, what's one misconception that you've encountered, you know, when you tell someone you're a writer, or when you tell someone, you know, that you write BDSM, or what kind of stuff you write? Like, are there some misconceptions that you tend to that you've had to cope with over the years?
Well, the funny thing is, so many people talk about being a writer that when you tell someone that that's what you do for a living, you get that automatic look like, oh yeah, that's probably just somebody who writes. You meet very few published working authors in your life. So you assume that when someone says that to you, oh, they're just trying to be a writer. Okay. So
right.
that never bothers me, but that's just is funny. It's always like so they'll follow up with, oh, well, are you writing a book? Have you written one? And I was like, well, I've written 50 and have 6 series. It's like, oh, okay, so she actually does this for a living. But there's that, and of course, writing romance, even before I wrote erotic romance, all romance authors deal with that kind of pause that says, oh, okay, so other than writing real books, you write romance, okay. You know, and you still get it. It's just what's crazy to me, but because, and there'll be a lot, you know, romance authors and readers. Now, when you're at a conference, of course, that's just the beautiful validation feeling, because the readers there do not feel that way at all. They understand that, you know, romance is, you know, about things that matter to women. It's about community. It's about family. It's about relationships. It's the things that are important to us. And yes, we may have the sexy hero with the great biceps, but at the core of a great romance is going to be those issues and emotions and connections that we look for in our real lives. So there's that issue, you know, you kind of deal with the little cute jokes, you know, that kind of thing. When I worked as a secretary, I worked as a secretary for about 20 years. I never hid what I wrote. I write under my own name. I didn't bring it up at work, but if people found out about it, there'd be the occasional person that when they found out that because of their own dealings with sexuality, they might deal with it a little bit immaturely, especially a couple times, gentlemen making the wrong assumptions about what I write and what that means, things like that. But or women feeling uncomfortable with, you know, that I have a lot of scenarios where they find out what I write, and then that is the last time the subject is ever brought up. They never ask anything about my professional life.
That's nice. And they say just subject. Yeah.
So things like that.
No, that's a very fair point. Yeah, it's almost why, like, I almost like to me, I maybe this is not an important distinction, but sometimes I'll say, if someone says, oh, I'm a writer, I'll say, like, well, are you a full-time writer, or is this just like a little side hobby for you? That's, to me, there's that huge sort of divergence, right? If you really, this is something you do full-time, then to me, that's a writer. You know, anyone who does this significantly, you know, they're
yeah. Do you ever get the, oh, that's interesting, what's your book about? Do you get that?
Like,
I get that.
One book.
Yeah, like, what's your book about? Yeah, gotten that several times. So I always say, which one?
Yeah, I usually try to counter with, oh, what are you interested in reading?
One book that you know they might want.
But that kind of condescension. Oh, what's your book about? Yeah. Okay.
Gail, didn't you have one time someone asked you what you wrote, and when you told them, they said something like, oh, you write entertaining.
Yes, you're right. I said, all right, genre fiction. He said, oh, entertaining fiction. I said, bet your ass it's entertaining.
Yep. Well, again, I think not just romance. I think a lot of genre authors, whether it's fantasy, etc., except mystery. For some reason, mystery is exempt. They just considered you're brainy if you write mystery. So, you know, you write something important. Right.
Heaven forbid if it's a mystery BDSM. I don't know how that would work.
That'll just blow their mind. They won't know how to react to that.
It's like,
that's great. Do you get like a sense, you know, with sort of 50 Shades and other breakout books that have kind of increased the sort of the relevance of BDSM maybe as a genre, has that changed perceptions like in an appreciable sort of cultural shift sort of way, or was that more just a flash in the pan, in terms of people being maybe more accepting or more open to, you know, BDSM as a subgenre?
I think it did a good job of bringing BDSM to the mainstream in terms of exposing a lot of people to seeing that it wasn't necessarily what they thought it was, or, you know, a deeper understanding that people who practice it are not necessarily this weird offshoot fringe society hiding underground and that kind of thing. It could be the person next door. It could be your grocer. It could be your banker, etc. Of course, it was a very romantic treatment of BDSM, like a lot of BDSM romance is. But I think that, like good BDSM romance, it did kind of give you that a little bit touch of that reality enough that you could explore it more if you wanted to, and it made it a little bit more okay to go explore it because everybody was reading it. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think it did help. And as for those of us who'd been writing it for years before then, I think pretty much across the board, we all saw a jump in sales and things like that as people went and looked for more.
Very good, very good. And you've actually anticipated some of my questions, so I'm gonna have to skip around here. But what about no, this is a good thing. How about just more generally, sort of like as a writer, what kind of works for you or what doesn't work for you in terms of writing advice or tried and true writing techniques?
The process. What's the process?
As far as process, I just want to get a sense of your process as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, as Gail knows, one thing that the advice that you don't write long. I can't follow that. I'm a long writer. I am long-winded. And I'm not concise at all. I like to explore my characters, and I like to explore them in ways sometimes that doesn't necessarily seem like it's that the writing advice was everything your characters do must drive the plot forward. And I felt like in a love story, some of the best parts were like when they go have a picnic together and spend the day together and do things, enjoyable things together. That gave me more insight into them. But at the same time, the need for romance and for love and to enjoy those moments and things like that. So that bit of advice I kind of a lot of times ignored. The write to market. Cannot write to market. Obviously, I started my career writing a genre that publishers said nobody wanted. And erotic romance was the same way. It was also considered cross-genre. People who want to read sex do not care about the romance. They just want to read sex. It's like, obviously, you just completely ignore what, what's going on out there. So writing to market, writing to trends. And the funny and ironic thing is when I was taking writing courses early on, and we've had guest editors and guest publishers, they'd all say, don't write to market, don't write to trends, write what's in your heart. That's what we want to see. And I, 10 years down the road, I said, y'all were big fat liars, really. No, but actually, I don't think they were. I think editors were avid readers who did want to see original, good stories. And unfortunately, powers that be and the corporate, the need for money. I mean, the business and the art always have a little bit of a problem.
Oh,
they have to figure out how to work together. But so writing to market just did not work for me, and writing short. And really, I feel like if you learn the elements of your craft, you learn to be a good writer. But when it comes to the content and the spirit of what you're writing, you follow your muse. And if your muse says you don't want to go down this way, you don't force yourself to write something you don't want to write.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Trust your subconscious.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I tell friends. Trust your subconscious because it knows what you're supposed to be writing and it will spew it out for you. Yes, absolutely. You take in all the information, it boils down there, and then the book comes out, the story comes out, the idea comes out.
Exactly.
You collaborate with anybody? Have you ever collaborated with anybody?
Only twice, and only once published. Desiree Holt and I wrote one for my Vampire Queen series, Nightfall, and we had a really good time doing it. It was a lot of fun. She and I meshed well. I do not really write well with others. I'm a very solo creator, so the fact I even, she was one of the few people that when we were sitting in a hotel room at a conference and started talking about the idea, and then it just kind of took off, and so we decided to pursue it together. And I probably was too overwhelming in the process, but she was nice through the whole thing. I was like, no, we're doing fine. It's good. No, I was like, do you mind if I change this? And can I do this? And are we okay going this way with this? And she's like, yes, this is fine. Let's do this too. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. So
I always like to know, because John and I have collaborated with several other people, and every time it's slightly different. Depending on the, depending on how you mesh, exactly as you say, but it is very, you're lucky to find someone that you can collaborate with, which is what I think wonderful and rare.
I agree.
I feel like every writer should, though, have one experience, one really deep collaboration. It really does, I think, make you grow as a writer. Makes you see your own faults in a new light, and I don't know. It's a humbling experience too.
It's a lot like when you're talking to aspiring writers. I don't know if you guys have had this experience. Is often I get this reaction that, well, I don't want to share it with anybody yet. It's just not ready. It's just not ready. It's like, join a writers group, start reading it aloud, let the other authors hear it, writers, authors, let them give you input, let them help you grow. That is very important. It's such an important part. You do not want the first impression of your writing to be that editor you send it to.
Yep.
Well, it's so weird because in most other arenas of life, this idea of you should hide your work under a rock, it doesn't make much sense at all. You know, I mean, no athlete would say, I just haven't trained enough. I can't show you what I'm capable of yet. Sorry, I'm not gonna play this game. I'm gonna sit this game out.
Yeah. I met a writer. He said, I can't even tell you the title because it's so perfect, and I'm sure somebody will steal it if I even speak it.
That too, the whole stealing thing. It's like, okay, I'm here to tell you the risk of you writing a bad book because you didn't let it get exposed to critique is far greater than somebody stealing your work.
I cannot encompass that. Stealing your idea. John W. Campbell used to give the same idea to 5 writers because he knew he'd get 5 stories.
That's right.
So you can't steal somebody's idea, because even if you write the same plot, it's going to be different because you're writing it and they're writing it. So
exactly.
So speaking of ideas, can you tell us a little bit about what are you currently working on, and what's kind of got you fired up currently?
The current book I'm working on is At Her Pleasure. It's part of my Mistresses of the Boardroom series. I write in BDSM dynamics. I write pretty much across the spectrum. I might write a male dom and a female submissive, or a female submissive and a male dom. I do menage. I do interracial. I do handicapped power exchange relationships. And so this series was an offshoot of my popular Knights of the Boardroom series, and that series was pretty much almost all male dom, female submissive. This one is female submissive, male dom, and it's got a lot of good, strong heroes in it because I've worked hard. One thing, romance readers are still, they've come a long way on it, but initially when we started introducing female doms, male subs, the romance community was like, no, that's going to be a wimpy sissy guy. No, I don't want that. And I was like, no. Yeah, male submissives can be powerful and alpha and protective and loving and everything else. And so we started to introduce what we called the palace guard submissive type. The chivalry, the Knights of the Boardroom, all that, those were submissive characteristics, service oriented. So I've been really enjoying writing this series. This is the 4th book in it. They can all stand alone because it's 5 women who run a very successful marketing company in New Orleans. And so each book is about one of them. And this current one, she is there's sadomasochism in BDSM, but there are, doms who are more sadistic, that they enjoy dishing out pain more. And she's one of those. And her hero is a former cop, and they actually meet the opening chapter. They meet years before. He finds her in a cemetery. She's drunk. She's angry. She's vandalizing the cemetery, and he has to decide whether to arrest her or not. And that's where their relationship starts.
Talk about a meet cute. I love that.
Exactly. So that's what I'm fired up and working on now.
Yeah, I think it's sort of interesting because I think there's like a misperception that if a reader likes, the dominant submissive style from one gender to another, that they will only be able to appreciate that one type. And I think a lot of I think a lot of readers just find that dom submissive relationship fascinating, regardless of what the dynamics are in terms of the gender and the, like you said, whether I like how you're inclusive and you do, handicapped and different things. But yeah, I think that I think what fascinates at least a lot of people about BDSM is it explores couples where you don't have this vanilla of, each couple has to be exactly equal, and do the exact, same things. You're more allowed to show that in a relationship you can have different roles, and that those roles can be complementary. They can be, each person can be very distinctive, Whereas I feel like in some vanilla romance, not to knock, regular romance, but sometimes to me, those couples are not very well distinguished. They're kind of very, I don't know, it's more like the Hallmark romance versus, each of them feeling like they're two individuals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that was a growth. I'm sorry, Gail, were you about to say something?
I'm just fascinated. Keep talking.
Just very short. That was a process for the author too, because when I first started writing power exchange relationships, because I am a female submissive, I thought that's what I was going to write. I was going to write all male doms, female submissive romances. Mm-hmm. And then the very second one I wrote, something wasn't working. He was just not working and she was not working. And it was just like, I was fighting every step mm-hmm. of the way. And then some weird thing in my head said, flip it, make her the dom and make him the sub. Huh. And it just took off. It was just like, and that was where my growth was, of realizing, as you just said, I may be a female submissive in my personal life, but as an author, I love exploring the dynamics of power exchange from whatever direction or compilation they exist. So, and I can do that because I am so interested in it.
And that lets you keep things fresh as a writer, because, if you're writing the exact same formula every time, I mean, that can get old. So this way you get to change it up.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
That's why I like to change genres and, write in this genre, that genre, as you're doing too, Joey. But I was just, getting this epiphany that, oh my goodness, most of my women are dominant. Wow, that's fascinating. I've never occurred to me.
So if Gail writes a BDSM, we know we know the power exchange there.
Yeah,
Let me know when it comes out. We'll market it.
That's what another thing, John and I want to talk to you privately about marketing.
Well, happy to talk about it.
And I do like, though, how Joey touches on something else that for me is very relevant, and that for a lot of people is the advice you get as a writer to write only what you know. So the idea that, because you were a submissive female, so you can only write that type of, I still as a writer encounter the interesting prejudice. I don't know if prejudice is too strong a word, but I encounter other writers who think that, if this is all outside my experience at all, I can't learn or use my imagination. I can't write that because it's not in my experience. Oh, no. And I just feel like that's really tragic. And I don't know if have you ever had people tell you, that you can't write something? And
I think it was a self-imposed worry. I know the first time I wrote a male, I was very concerned because I was like, okay, I'm not a gay man. How am I going to do this? But what happened was that story, Marcus and Thomas's story, was so strong emotionally to me that what I realized was and of course, let me step back. There's two parts to this. I think one thing that helps you when you go into an area that you're not as sure of is doing a tremendous amount of research, and research meaning not just buying a nonfiction book. These days with the internet, it's delightful. There are so many personal blogs out there, like, reading about a man's experience and how he feels about things. And as he's talking about how he feels about things, you find yourself relating to some of the struggles he's going through, because they have a different form in your life, but or insecurity or worries, or am I not good enough for my partner, or how does my family feel about this relationship? All of a sudden I realized those things, that's where you connect. You do the research to help you with the areas you don't know as much about, and then you connect to the emotions that you do, and it comes together.
Yeah, there's a what kind of taught. I had that same epiphany, Joey, when I saw the movie. I think it's called Moonlight, and it's about two African American men growing up in a very, very tough neighborhood. And I believe it won some awards. But that was the first sort of gay romance story that really taught me, like, it's about the emotions and it's about the characters, and it doesn't matter what your orientation is. A good story is just a good story.
Mm-hmm. Yes. That's like to be on the wall of every author's writing space.
We need reminders, don't we?
We do. We all do.
So, all right. So I guess now this may coincide with earlier you were talking about what you're fired up about. Any other shameless promotions you want to do? Because believe it or not, we've already hit almost the 30-minute mark here, so time flies when you're having fun.
All right. Well, I'll. What Gail held up earlier was a little postcard. I have 5 free Gateway to Series books. So out of my 6 series, there is a free book for each of them, and it's not a throwaway book that I wrote. They are actual members of the series that were published, and then I decided to make that one free. Almost all of them are the first book in the series, except for one, and it's still a good standalone to rent. And so I recommend people to, you know, they can find those. If you go to my Facebook page, you'll see it on reference in the feature. You'll see it in the banners. You can email me about it. You know, I'm sure we can even put it in the comments below, like the link.
I'll put a link to each of those 5 series in the description.
Perfect. Awesome. So you can kind of see if I'm your cup of tea without spending any money, and I like that option because it gives them a chance to. And there's, I think 3 of them are paranormal. There's vampires, mermaids, and let's see. Well, a couple contemporary, couple fantasy. So I won't tax my brain here trying to pull them all. But yeah, so it's a little something for whatever your interest is.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, Joey, thanks for coming on today as a guest. And you know, I told Gail before we started this, I said, Gail, we're going to blink our eyes and we're already going to be, it's like, time just flies. So.
I was delighted to be here, and like I said, I'm happy to talk to y'all about marketing or whatever y'all like to talk about.
All right. Well, we'll have to have you back on again.
Yes.
Okay.